You're watching Euronews Now. I'm Takumbo Silako with your top stories. France and Germany seek a meeting of minds in talks with Kiev and Moscow after Joe Biden threatens personal sanctions against Vladimir Putin over the Ukraine crisis. We'll be live from the House of Commons as the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson battles for survival over those lockdown parties at number 10. And fancy getting your hands on some Beatles memorabilia? John Lennon's son Julian is auctioning off rights in a digital deal for NFTs.
When people see the US delivering military aid to Ukraine, a country with 100,000 Russian soldiers poised on its border, it's understandable they worry. Tensions are undoubtedly high. On Tuesday evening, France and Germany were united in calling for the heat in the crisis to be turned down, but they remained resolutely behind Ukraine. We're preparing in parallel a common reaction and response. In case of aggression, if there is aggression, there'll be retaliation, and the cost will be very high. Chancellor Scholz was also asked if he felt Germany had betrayed countries such as Poland and Ukraine by not taking a quicker and tougher stance against Moscow. In recent years, the German government has repeatedly decided not to supply lethal weapons. There are reasons for that, which are fed by the developments of recent years and decades. Nevertheless, we've done a great deal to actively support economic development and the development of democracy in Ukraine, not just through finance, but also within the framework of international responsibilities that we have. But if Europe would like to see tensions lowered, it won't have helped that Russia started joint naval drills with China today in the Western Arabian Sea. The US-Russia negotiations are completed at this stage. Before we understand when and in what format they should continue, we'll need to receive the written reply from the US. We hope it'll happen this week. And what we're seeing at the moment from the US side, informationally and de facto, is the escalation of tension. We talked a lot about it yesterday. Nothing changes here. We're watching these US actions with great concern. Ukrainians have been saying in recent days they're hoping for the best but preparing for the worst. The diplomacy is at least still in play. President Macron said he'd talk to Russia's President Vladimir Putin by phone on Friday. Mark Armstrong, Euronews.
In the unlikely setting of a Washington gift shop, US President Joe Biden has issued his latest warnings to Russia over Ukraine, including the threat of personal sanctions against Vladimir Putin himself in the event of an invasion.
There will be enormous consequences worldwide. This would be the largest, if he were to move in with all those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
Biden's firm rhetoric has surprised those who would prefer a more conciliatory approach. But for the opposition Republicans, the complaint is that, if anything, he's not doing enough to react to the threat from Moscow.
Deploying additional NATO troops, including some of our own, into Poland, Romania, the Baltics, now, not after an incursion.
Opinion polls suggest that only about a quarter of Americans have confidence in Biden to effectively manage the military or promote US standing in the world.
As tensions continue to rise over the situation on Ukraine's borders, European countries are stepping up efforts to try and defuse the crisis. Today, here in Paris, political advisors from France and Germany are hosting their counterparts from Ukraine and Russia within the framework of the Normandy talks to try and find common ground. France's President Emmanuel Macron has been organizing a series of diplomatic initiatives over the last few days, saying it is crucial for Europe to work together towards rapid de-escalation. Emmanuel Macron says talks must continue, but that Europe should make it clear that a response in case of Russian aggression will be, quote unquote, massive. Emmanuel Macron is scheduled to hold talks with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, over the next few days. And a phone call between him and Vladimir Putin is scheduled for Friday. At the Élysée Palace, his advisors are saying that Emmanuel Macron is ready to show solidarity and support towards EU member states concerned for their security, and that he will use all diplomatic tools at his disposal to protect the stability of Europe. Annelise Borges in Paris for Euronews.
Police in London confirmed on Tuesday that they'll investigate alleged parties at Downing Street during lockdown, some of which the UK Prime Minister attended. The announcement puts further pressure on Boris Johnson's Conservative government. The city's Metropolitan Police Commissioner revealed that an investigation was underway in a statement before the London Assembly.
I can confirm that the Met is now investigating a number of events that took place at Downing Street and Whitehall in the last 2 years in relation to potential breaches of COVID-19 regulations. I should stress that the fact that we are now investigating does not, of course, mean that fixed penalty notices will necessarily be issued in every instance and to every person involved.
The Partygate allegations have infuriated many in Britain who were barred from meeting with friends and family for months in 2020 and 21 to curb the spread of COVID-19.
So I welcome the Met's decision to conduct its own investigation, because I believe this will help to give the public the clarity it needs and help to draw a line under matters. We agreed on the necessity of
The various party claims are being investigated by a senior civil servant whose report could come this week. The police haven't said exactly which alleged events they'll be looking at.
The Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
General Capo Deliano and other of his war leaders are on the balcony with him, and Italian volunteers figure prominently in the Victory March.
The Dutch government announced an easing of lockdown measures. This is despite souring case numbers. Prime Minister Mark Rutte further relaxed the Netherlands' coronavirus restrictions, allowing bars, restaurants, museums, theatres and other venues to reopen from Wednesday for the first time this year. Health officials warn, however, that the easing may be premature.
Over the past week, we saw an increase of about 15% in hospital admissions. We don't see that increase in the number of admissions to intensive care, but for the hospital as a whole. We expected this to happen now because the number of infections has been increasing for some weeks. With the upcoming easing of measures, the number of positive tests will increase even more in the coming period. So we expect there'll be more hospital admissions with a peak in March.
Meanwhile, in France, more than 500,000 new cases were recorded in the past 24 hours on Tuesday. The numbers of those in hospital also surpassed 30,000 for the first time since April 2021. The country has ramped up its testing capabilities, with testing now being provided at local pharmacies. Romania is also seeing a surge in the Omicron variant. 174 evaluation centres were opened across the country. Those experiencing mild forms of the virus can be assessed and treated here, alleviating pressures on hospital wards.
Our Brussels bureau has been looking into the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and what role it could play in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Do check out that story on our website. We're taking a break, but we'll be back in a few moments.